have all that we use. And so I figure we can just go through it. And I'm an admin, so if there are any questions, I'll try to kind of give a tour of how things are configured, and other people might have things you're trying to do with Jira or Confluence that you're curious about, and we can go all the way. We could even log into the server, shell in and look at some logs if everybody wants to. I don't know. All right, so I'll share my screen. I think I'm gonna share this. Share this Chrome window. All right, so let me start with what you read that brought you all back in here. So how Nerd uses Jira Software, Service Desk, and Confluence for Nerd Summit. And I'll try not to be too confusing because we're learning every year, and that changes how we think we'll best use our tools. So I'm thinking of some changes. Some I've hinted at, some I've yet to propose, but that might color some of the demo here. So we want to look at let's see, we'll look at Confluence Spaces, team pages, which we use more recently than later. We can talk about that. And tasks getting into Jira. And then we've got Jira Projects, and we've got Jira Boards. Integrating that in with Confluence. We do have Portfolio, which only I really use just as kind of like to experiment with it. And then the service desks, which everybody here had experience with at one point or another, especially for session submission. And we can talk about how we use the Jira boards to select and schedule the conference presentations. So I think one of the easier ways to talk about all of this is just to think about the user flow. So this is the website. Almost everything starts at the website. Anything that doesn't start at the website is, further up the funnel, which would start from a newsletter or from a tweet that somehow gets people to the website. One of the tricky things about this demo is our website is pretty dynamic. So the main call to action earlier in the year is going to be something like maybe submit a session or more information. Or Rick, do you remember right after this summit, what will we change get tickets to if there aren't tickets to buy anymore and there's nothing to sponsor yet? Save the, oh, you're muted.
What do we change them to?
Yeah, maybe it's save the date.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Something like that.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah.
I remember, I'm sorry to jump in, but I remember it being something like see what sessions, contribute a session and see what sessions were being offered last year.
Ah, yes. Great. So at some point, so a lot of that, and like right now, get tickets leads to Tito. We use Tito to sell the tickets. But if it's saving the date, getting more information, viewing the sessions from last year, or sponsoring, the button here would be one of those, and it would send people to Confluence. And so here's Confluence. Another interesting thing about this is Confluence Cloud. We have been for the past couple of years been using Confluence Server. A little side story is that Microsoft changed the way that it donates money to nonprofits and slashed our funding down to the point where we couldn't afford to keep running Confluence on Azure Cloud. So we pivoted quickly to Confluence, and it turns out that the migration between Confluence Server and Confluence Cloud was pretty reasonable to do. Kind of like a click and pray and clean some stuff up later. So this is basically what the server edition looks like, except the cloud version has this kind of cooler looking sidebar, which ironically they're pivoting back to making it look more like the server edition because they got I think there's a lot of people that use Atlassian products that don't like to change. So they put up with this sidebar for a while. I think it's fine, but so the call to action on the website would probably lead you into one of these spaces. So it could be view session, press sessions. It could be save the date and volunteer. which there are various ways to join in. And one of the reasons why we ended up using Confluence for this content is because we switched the website to be a single page and to be hosted on GitHub, which made a really big difference with who could contribute to it. So at first we started with a Drupal site, which is like, obviously we can put all of our content on there, but getting people to volunteer and help maintain and update and modify a Drupal site was like everybody was too busy. But as soon as we switched to it being on GitHub where people could make pull requests and it was basically HTML, it really lowered the barrier to being able to volunteer. So let's see. So so if we wanted a link to past sessions, we have all these here. And so really, we've just been using this as a content management. Probably going to switch out of this for next year, but that's one of those things I haven't really shared yet. I've got some ideas. If I log, I should be logged into this. Yeah. So I should be able to see Summit Organizer space.
And the past sessions that was in the top right, was that some kind of a widget that you dropped in there to?
Oh, great question.
Or are you using a table to create two columns? Like how are you structuring the page?
So this is edit mode, and
oh, it's sections. So
yeah,
it's just sections.
Yep. Yeah, so we just use sections. Yeah, one of the things to watch out for is if you put things in sections, then things like tables don't get a lot of the automatic treatment. Like if let's say that this table was really, really long and it had a header row, if it's not in a page section, if it's just out on its own, that header row will be sticky, which can be really valuable. And actually we might see that if we switch over to the Summit Organizer space. So we were using this quite a bit. One of the things I find with Confluence is it just doesn't hold a candle to Google Docs in enough ways that Google Docs just has this real great like gravity to it. So I think what we've learned from trying to use Confluence at all is where Google Docs really just makes more sense. But while we were getting there, we were able to construct these team pages. So we have our summit. So this was the 2019 summit, and each team had a page. And here's the 2020 summit. So we go into the 2020 summit. So we're on the 2020 summit, and we've got a table like here's target date and status if we're good. So if anybody thinks we're not, they can get this to yellow or red. And this kind of holds some of the longer or like the more static content, like the CFP date when it closes. So you can go here to get some of that information. And this generates this pulls data up from each team page that's below. So you can see the page is below here. And if I go and I edit this, we'll see that this is just a page properties report for the teams.
So not table of child page or something like that. It's page properties.
Yeah, we want it to be a page properties report so that it can get this kind of like this structured data pulling up into it. If it were like child pages, it would just be like the names of them. But if you do a page properties report, you can get more dynamic information, and it really makes this. Yep.
Can you show the properties on one of those pages, like the page?
Yep. Yep. So it really makes this more of like a landing page status board, because each team can have their own page and they can say whether or not they're on track, and it bubbles up to this overview page. And then another thing with the tasks widget, it will bubble up any incomplete task that any team has identified. It bubbles it all up and could sort it by due date into this top level incomplete tasks. So you can kind of see.
And are those tasks coming from Jira, or is this all self-contained within Confluence?
Yeah, let me go into the sponsor team one. So this is the sponsor team page, and one of the things that gets it to show up there is it's tagged with a team. So it's tagged as a team page. So we're able to create that properties report.
Right. But
Let me
did
edit
you
this.
did you like define page properties and you're able to decide what attributes are part of page properties?
Yeah. So if you, so this is a page properties widget. So if we open up they call them macros. So
Yeah, yeah.
if I put my cursor here and I open up other macros
Yep.
and I find the page properties, that's going
Right.
to plot this in here, and any table that you put in here basically lets you create that structured content. And so when you do a page properties report, it's going to create tables of all this information across all of the pages that match the query.
So you're basically turning each Confluence page into a record in a database sort of thing where
This kind of makes it into a content type.
Right.
And these are the fields.
Right. Whereas everything else down below is basically just a blob of
Yeah, and so this is a blob of sponsors, which is a Jira query. So those dynamically update as the sponsors come in, and any volunteers that specified that they wanted to help with sponsoring show up there. And so the teams can meet, and the page can be where they meet, and they identify what tasks they're going to do. So what we have is this template of things that the team needs to do pretty much every year, so they can start with a new year with a new template of tasks, and say that they have a meeting. And so here's an example of a task, but they could also have a meeting about updating the summit prospectus and say, so like bullets, numbered lists, and task lists. If you start one of those and say, @ Kelly will engage the, outreach team, right? And you could say maybe you want to do it by the next week's meeting. So when you save that, see how this one's kind of formatted that way, by the date. We'll do this by the date. So when you save something like that, that's what's going to roll up. So the tasks will all show up on this page, and you can meet and mark them done when they get done, but they also are going to roll up to this parent page. So this is for the whole summit. And
so the tasks show up across. So these tasks come from different pages. They happen to all be on. No, they're different. You've got logistics and you've got sponsors. I saw down below.
Yeah. If there were incompleted tasks, here's a sponsors one. Most of them are from logistics. Most of them probably should be checked off. It's just when we started moving faster than Confluence with the shift to virtual, and I think we never really broke away from Google Docs. I think this is the part where just Google Docs is just easier for a lot of things, and so when we really needed to move fast, we just did things quickly in Google Docs. But this is how it has worked, and it worked just fine. And also, I guess another thing that we never did in terms of change management was we kind of never really officially, we were just trying this out one year, and then it was we were kind of trying it out the next year. We never made it hey, we're doing this. It's more self-organizing. So I think, we definitely use this quite a bit. But there was nothing keeping us from anybody using Google Docs when it made sense for them to do so.
And was there a conscious decision to do task management in Confluence versus Jira? Because maybe it's simpler to have it all in one place, and
I don't think we came up with we probably discussed it in a couple calls, but Jira is, I think, the place where if something's a little more serious and you're not sure when you're going to get it done, you make a Jira issue for it, and it could go into a Jira backlog that you can kind of manage independently of Confluence. I'd say what is a good candidate for a Confluence task is something that's going to get done by a future meeting. So you're going to meet about it and mark it done because it's done, or you're going to get it done right away. Or sometimes a task that you create in Confluence could be a task for either doing it or making a Jira issue out of it. So you can see, I think we saw one of those in the sponsor page. We're right here. So this update the sponsor prospectus, nobody's going to do it right away, but we identified it as something that needed to get done eventually. So a Jira ticket was created for it. And if you just paste one of these links into Confluence, it shows up like this. You can also, you could also as a team decide like, oh, we're going to do this eventually. And you could just do, you know, add a Jira issue and you can create a new one right from,
Yeah.
you know, right from Confluence.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done a bunch of that recently with my project.
Yeah. So this table isn't long enough for me to show you that floating header, but this table is not in one of those formats, one of those like layouts, so that this, for the longer lists, which probably the logistics one's probably an example, although it might make a liar out of me. Let's see. Those are all the, oh yeah, see this is automatically pulling in from Jira server. People made a bunch of orders for swag. Yeah, see that this is supposed to be, it's not sticky. I don't know what the deal, I don't know, it might be a switch from server to cloud that, I don't know, but anyway, not a big deal. So basically the transition is the teams are meeting about this stuff's getting done between meetings, other things are branching out into Jira. So that's one of the ways that the team's work gets into Jira. If it's something that's going to need to be assigned and tracked across a longer stretch of time, it's good to get it into Jira. So those were there was the main space, there was the organizer space. I don't know if anybody wants to see any of that, but this is a Summit organizer space. View all spaces.
So wait, so Summit organizers is different from, so what space were you in for all of that? Was that Summit organizers?
Summit organizers, yep.
Okay, got it.
That's the Summit organizer space. And then the session space and the sponsorship space are like landing pages that basically have information that the calls to action direct them to different service desk areas. So I can get into that. And the nerd space is the public space. Actually, yes, I think Summit Organizers is not public right now. But the nerd space is kind of that public content space that we put all the content that used to be on our Drupal sites. So these are those spaces.
Where's all the content for the sessions that we've been looking at the past 2 days on nerdsummit.org?
That is a
Google. I thought you guys were doing that in Confluence or Jira.
We were, I think 2 years ago. Let me try to get the sheet to show up. There's been a recently just this year with the redesign.
I just pasted it in, Kelly.
Oh, it's coming from a Google Doc?
Yeah, that's a change we made recently. Originally the dream a couple of summits ago was that so I got Jira open here. So the dream a couple of years ago, I'm not sure exactly the nuts and bolts of what we ended up doing. Rick could probably speak to it the year before this year. But we could have all the sessions are getting submitted, and you know, we could have the summit sessions, their session proposals, and they are in the closed state, and their resolution is scheduled, you know, something like that. And we could add all the columns, whatever columns we want, and we could export it as JSON or, you know, as some format. So there was this thinking that we could, and then also it's pretty straightforward to access that JSON as a kind of like an API. So there was this thinking that we could really just link up the schedule, but I think it ended up being easier what were we doing before this, Rick?
It was a crazy system of taking the sessions that got submitted, which used to be, what was that other thing we were using? that
Oh,
paper call.
paper call. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but either way we were doing it, I would just make I would just download the data from wherever it was, physically make a JSON file or something crazy and use that to create the schedule or something like that. So it wasn't good.
Yeah. Yeah. So the thinking was we've got all the information that we need. We could have, we get summary, we get reporter, we get, I think components is another one. So with like what track it's in. So essentially we could, bust this out to JSON or just access it through the URL. But I think, I don't know. I think there were just conversations leading up to this year where it just made sense to get it in a Google sheet. So this is kind of like an export. I'm not sure how much manual kind of data cleaning it took Rick and what his thoughts are for next year to get it into this. But this was an experiment for this year, I think, that worked really, really well. Well, actually, I think we kind of had something. It was in a spreadsheet for last year somehow, wasn't it?
No, I remember that wherever we put the data, I downloaded it as a CSV file. I turned it into a JSON file and then used that as the data.
Oh no, yeah, I remember editing where I was editing it was in GitHub. Yeah.
Hey, Kelly, one thing you might want to show is the picking of the sessions, because that was the best thing.
Yep. So let's do, so you go to the website, we're sending out tons of newsletters, submit your session, it drives you to the website, you click the button, submit a session, that's gonna land you, here, right? And so, here's the information, submit your session in the session submission portal. This is Service Desk. Service Desk is very interesting. And so if you submitted a session, you probably filled out this form. And when you submit something in here, that submits something into Nerd Summit Sessions, which is a Service Desk project, and puts it in this queue. So basically the sessions pile in, and I can show you something quick with how this is configured. The request types in Service Desk are what the help desk things that people experience here, right? So if we go to the help center, we go to session proposal, technical sessions. These are the request types, and what these are like customer facing interfaces to these issue types. So even though you see travel requests and other suggestions, those are separate here. They're both gonna submit a service request ticket, although there's a different experience to submitting either. Same with the session proposals. And you can do a similar thing where you can edit the fields that basically has a display name and field help, but it lines up to certain, you can make certain Jira issue fields available to your quote unquote customers. So they have their own, you can really kind of craft the experience. And then this gives them, they submit it and they have a Service Desk account, which does not cost money from a licensing perspective. And I'll just do all requests, and gives them a way to track their session submissions. And let's see if I have a.
And is there the ability to have discussion thread on missions?
Yeah. So when you're in, this is just where it's configured, and I'll get out to one of the sessions. So let's say this one, or let's say this one, like, we wanted to hold his session in case something opened up. You can comment internally, or you can share with the customer. Everything you comment internally stays in here in the Jira issue. Everything you share with the customer goes in here and goes into the customer's request, which this is what you would see as a customer. And you can do things like cancel your request, escalate your request. You can configure what happens in here. That's all through the, no, it's not through here. It's through the workflow, the workflows. So you can configure when you configure a service desk workflow, you're able to check a box to make it visible to the customer or not. And what Rick is talking about, what we kind of stumbled on as being a much easier way than all giving, and also service desk licenses are super expensive. So we get this all free from Jira, but it's just, there's some, I have in my other company, we pay for Jira, and it's kind of like the service
Yeah, I
desk.
was going to ask about the service desk because we used it in a company and they're expensive.
They're very expensive. So I'm just kind of in the habit of like, I just feel like it's the right strategy to not do something that's going to require a lot of service desk agents. So we stumbled on creating a board for the sessions. And so all that a board is it's really just, if you use Drupal, it's just like a view of issues shown.
Yeah, a Kanban board, right?
Yep. So we made a board, and our query was basically anything that matches. You can see our query, just sessions and the proposal, and ordered by rank. Okay, so that pulls in all the sessions that people submitted.
But is that pulling them from Service Desk, or is that pulling them from the Jira project?
Even the issues in Service Desk, they're just issues. Everything's an issue in Jira.
So basically, Service Desk is a way to expose some of those issues to your external constituents who aren't internal members of your project.
And we did, and you have to have a Service Desk license to be able to edit issues that have Service Desk functionality. So we did end up having to give Service Desk licenses to people that were going to be moving these issues over. But that was how we discovered using this board. And this board has a backlog, and I'll explain a little bit about how that works. So if somebody submits an issue or a session proposal, it's going to pile up. They're all going to pile up in this backlog. And so something that we do is the session proposal deadline is midnight on a certain night. And on midnight at that night, we can move all these sessions into actually proposed. And that way, if anybody submits a session after the deadline, it ends up in this backlog. And so that gives us a way to see, like, all right, well, this one was after the deadline, but it looks really good. Maybe we'll let it in. And then this proposed section is the same thing as this proposed column right here. And this is what we really look at with the content shares. I don't know if this makes this smaller. Yeah. All right. Well, so we'll look at this.
You set up swim lanes based on type.
Yeah. So when you
yeah, I've been playing with that some in one of my Kanban boards, so I've figured out how to do that.
Right. When you submit a session, you pick a topic, and the topics are components.
Yeah.
And so we configured our components to be swim lanes, which right here in the settings are swim lanes. So we made component is this, and that's just going to put any issue in that component in that swim lane.
But you don't have to do that anymore. You could do swim lanes based on. Oh no, you're right. You can do like epics, but if you want to do it based on components, you have to literally name out each component, don't you?
Yeah.
It's super annoying that you can't just do like epics and just say show it by component.
Yeah. Well, we're a little ahead of Atlassian, I guess.
Yeah, I'm in the process of doing this now, but I have over 50 components. Yeah. So it's a bit of a bugger.
They've got thousands of feature requests. It's pretty crazy. Pretty crazy. So what really worked really well was we would have a back-end track chair, project management track chair. These just break down across the track chairs. So the chairs only really had to worry about what was in their column. And so we would meet and we would say, pull all the ones in progress that you think are good And then we would meet again and we would talk. And so we get the numbers here up in the swim lane. So if you have a sense of we've got 50 slots, we can start to have a conversation of, you know, if they pull over everything that they think is good and this number says like 60, then it's like, all right, let's have a conversation as a team about, you know, which ones can we nudge back over into proposed. And then once we get this number to the right number and the sessions are in the priority that each chair, because prioritization is just dragging and dropping, they get them into the column, into the priority, and we get the number right. And then accepting them, and then they go over to accepted. And we have these columns configured so that when it moves from in progress to accepted, it pops open a little window to basically send a message. And they use we have the canned responses here. So they could say this, we're happy to, you know, we've got this configured. They can modify it. They can add a little note. They can sign their name, share it with the customer. And so we have canned responses configured for most of the steps, right? Like your talk has been scheduled. Here's some further instructions. Talks accepted but not yet scheduled. That's where we get people, I think. We ask them if there's a day that they can't do, declined or held as backup, or a couple others. And this is where you would edit those responses.
Kelly, how do you handle scheduling constraints? So somebody can only be there on Friday afternoon.
That is a great question. The way that we just kind of naturally self-organized into that is we use the labels. So if you go into any session, Jira has components which you can configure separately, and you can really kind of control them. So this isn't the part that's answering your question, but we can have components, and we can have these are the track chairs, so you can kind of like configure it and add more information. But then it also has labels. So components are controlled and configured per project, but labels, well, let me go back here. But labels are kind of like the Wild West. Just use, you know, if somebody's trying to do something and they need to, you know, mark something, just use a label. So we ended up using, so you can see here. So basically, if it's accepted but not scheduled, the track chair kind of handles all of the proposals within their track to ask to get them confirmed. And as the attendee responds and says, that sounds great, I'd be happy to do it as confirmed, and then it gets marked as confirmed. And then if they request, I can only do it Friday, that gets labeled as Friday. And so once it gets into needs scheduling and we've got the right number and we've got the right order, then what I do is I go to Friday and I grab the ones that need Friday and I just go down the list and plug them into Friday. And then, and so basically what I try to do is I try to do the top priority one from each track. So I'll do the top priority backend one, the top priority project management one, the top priority design UX, and I just plug them into open spots. And since we have, I think, 6 tracks, but 5 slots, what that does is it shifts every time you go through all the sessions from each track, it shifts it. So no session ever ends up in the same room on the same track back to back. And so once we switched to this, it really like kind of spread the load of picking and prioritizing the sessions across the track chairs. And then it turns something, so picking and prioritizing the sessions and getting them into schedules was like a 4 to 6 hour thing when Rick and I would try to do it, just the two of us. Doing it this way with the track chairs, they each read a handful of sessions, they pick a smaller handful, they prioritize them, and then scheduling takes 15 minutes to just basically like copy pasting down across the schedule. And as I schedule each one, I just drag it over into scheduled, and I drag it over into scheduled, and I send them this canned response. I think I did that this year. Talk scheduled, further instructions. I think in previous years we had all the track chairs do all the communication, but it was so quick.
Okay, and then you wind up copying and pasting into the Google Sheets?
I must have. Did I, Rick?
Yeah. Well, I
Do that.
downloaded, there was a query somewhere here where I could download them all as a CSV, and then I put that in the Google Sheet.
Okay, so you could use the API to do that synchronization if you wanted to.
I think you could. We can't the way it is right now. But yeah, I think Rick put them in, and then I think I moved them around.
Yeah.
Yeah. This year was a little different. The previous year, last year, I just, whatever we had set up, I just plopped them in, and the whole thing took 15 minutes. This year we spent a little extra time thinking about, and I don't remember where that came from. We just kind of, I guess we just kind of winged it last year, but this year we kind of thought about room size, and that's kind of funny to think about now.
But with virtual, you don't need to think about that anymore.
Right. So that's scheduling them and communicating, and so people can email responses to their service desk issues, and that all shows up in service desk. There's a similar flow with sponsors. So right here, so become a sponsor. Actually, that sends you right to the place that it would for sponsorships. If they decide they want to sponsor, the call to action is the sponsorship help portal. That sends them here where they can sponsor a nerd summit, fill in the form. The sponsorship options, these are components in the back end of service desk. When they create something in here, it goes into the summit sponsor project, where the queue is empty. We locked in all our sponsors. We've got our current sponsors right here in the components. And
here in this project, your components are the sponsor level and what they sponsor sometimes, maybe, or
yeah, the add-ons are their own thing.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So sometimes when somebody fills out the sponsorship form, they might be interested in multiple different levels. So they'll pick 2 or 3 and ask a question,
Right.
And then we'll communicate with them in the back end here. And as we kind of lock something in, we'll edit the components and cancel the ones they didn't want to do.
Got it. And so while you're communicating in the form of comments, I guess, they're seeing that through service desk.
Yeah, so this is what our service desk agents are doing, and this is what they're seeing. And they could log in, they could click to renew this sponsorship, and what that's going to do is send a message and set this back to open as a
Okay.
as a new
And do
issue.
they see the actual form with all the content they submitted? Do they have to click renew to see what they submitted?
This is that's a good point. I think this is something I tried this year and nobody used it. But yeah, that's a good point. But really all this does is it just sets this issue back to open, and it would be something where we identify the conversation. Yeah, so I mean, in the session view for people's sessions, there's a similar thing so if somebody didn't have, let's see, like you could repropose the session. So if the session got declined for whatever reason, they could log in, they could just repropose this session, and it would just flip back to open in the sessions service desk project. Let's see. Yeah, so those are the service desks for help centers, sponsor portals, session submissions. And then we looked at the Jira boards to select and schedule conference presentations. Cool. So I guess we're in the questions and answers part. Right on time.
Yeah.
So I could talk a little bit about what I think is going to change, or what I'm going to propose changing. Is I think I checked out HubSpot a couple of years ago. Maybe it's been 3 years ago now, and it wasn't really a good fit. but they're continuously improving their product, and their free version, I think, is a good fit for switching to that over doing the sponsor portal. So that would be especially this year, it really started to seem like a better fit because we had at least 3 other people on the sponsorship team, and we very quickly ran into this thing like identifying leads and following up on leads, whereas before it was just me, and I was just trying to talk to everybody and just emailing people and communicating and trying to get them to the sponsor form. But HubSpot, and maybe I think this is something we're gonna switch to from Jira.
HubSpot, looks like on their blog just a couple days ago, posted how to launch a virtual conference for lead generation and customer acquisition, a step-by-step guide.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, so one thing that we didn't really have, we used Salesforce I used Salesforce for a couple of years, but it was just like way overkill for this kind of stuff. But we kind of abandoned that, and then we never really had like a CRM for sponsors. So I think and Jira or Confluence isn't really a good place to have a CRM. So this is kind of like a CRM where we can identify deals to contact people and move them across. And then basically I've configured this to, once it gets to closed or won, it forces you to have a QuickBooks invoice number and a link to Jira. So one of the last steps before you close it is the idea that I'm having is that you would create an issue in Jira to track doing something like getting the site on their name,
Their content
on the website.
Yeah.
So really pulling that out of the value stream that is Jira, and having it running in parallel with ways to trigger the creation of stuff in Jira.
Where do you capture all of the user or attendee registrations? We all registered for the summit. Where do you capture that?
That's all in Tito. So another tool we use is
yeah, I've seen references to Tito. I've never used it. Is that like a lightweight CRM system?
No, it's just events. I don't know if we're an upcoming event or a past event. So really it's just, this is the event page that's being configured in this backend. So
Yeah.
it's not integrated in with anything.
But it's really great. We love it.
Yep.
It's pretty lightweight and fit for a very specific purpose.
Yeah, it's really just to the point. Where Eventbrite is kind of, I don't know, I get irritated trying to use Eventbrite sometimes. It's like they're almost making it more about whatever they think their thing is. Tito just feels like it's just like, here's the stuff you need to do, get your tickets, and you can just do what you need to do. Like we started using the messaging quite a bit this year. It's been pretty reliable. And well, in addition to the switch to HubSpot from Service Desk for sponsorship, I also have a Shopify site, which you may have bought your swag on, right? We've got our 2020 swag to make that virtual this year, but we can also do the sponsor Nerd Summit. So a lot of the sponsors that sponsor Nerd Summit again and again and again, they really just need to just pick one and pay for it. They don't really need to have a conversation.
Right.
So I'm thinking to switch from that, and then that sends out emails when things are purchased, and those emails could create issues in a sponsor service desk queue for us to make sure payment processed and then get them on the website. Well, do we go till 5 today?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Theoretically, having a little birds of a feather now on this channel, talking about agile project management and product management.
Cool. Well, I see that there are a good number of participants. What's the participant count?
20.
20. Nice. Wow. So I don't know if there's any other questions about this.
I have a completely unrelated, well, not unrelated, but how much does this scale? I mean, how big a conference you could run using this method?
That is a great question. I think that I think I've thought about that, right? If we go, so like one of the big things that the first thing that I would want to think about is this, because I've been on the session selection committee for DrupalCon. So Nerd Summit gets probably, we've probably gotten close to 100 as a high for session submissions. I think this year was maybe close to 70 or something.
Yep.
And then we get that many, and then we pick like 50. But DrupalCon, they get like 1,000 and pick 90.
Yeah, we got like, I want to say we got like maybe 800, 900 this year. And us and the team, we whittled it down to, I think it was like 120, 130, something like that. Yeah, so I know when I did the project management track, one year I read, even when we split it up into tags, it actually was even more reading. But yeah, you read like you have to read 90 sessions and do something with 90 sessions. So on this model, there would be 90 sessions in this swim lane, and then there would be like 100 sessions in this swim lane. Like I don't know. I don't know if it would scale, or if you would have some pre-step before you got into this situation. Yeah, actually, Kelly, I looked at this model and I brought it up when we were doing a little retrospective for DrupalCon. This year, moving from tags back to tracks, the session selection committee took kind of a separation of reviewing the speakers first, and then the second wave was reviewing sessions. And that was to try to be a bit more efficient. If you recall last year with the tags, that was just so much. There was so many reviews. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, fortunately, I was able to make the time, and I felt like it was really rewarding to be able to spend that much time and really pick the sessions. But I don't know if it doesn't seem sustainable. It didn't seem sustainable. No, I reviewed over 300 sessions last year. That's right. You had so many. Oh, my. So bad. So yeah, I can tell you, like, looking at this, I do believe that it does scale. I think the visuals that you would need to be a bit more divided up by track, and then have some sort of better like global dashboard. But I think based on what I observed as a speaker for Nerd Summit, having gone through that funnel and kind of anticipating what it is that you were using in the back end, I think it could scale. Yeah, because I mean, even if there's a long list, like even if there's like 100 in one of these swim lanes, you're gonna pick out 10. I mean, you could have a separate board for getting through proposed. Like if you had two boards and one of them, started where the other one left off, like you could have another board where it's like submitted, evaluated for the speaker, evaluated for the content, and then accepted to the next stage. And then this one could start at accepted at the last stage, and it would be basically each track picks like 10. And you can filter by things that you would anticipate filtering by: track, topic, like show me all the sessions about Layout Builder, because there's going to be several. Each committee member, because actually with something as large as DrupalCon, there were like 3 other people working on stuff with me, and we were all focused. We had a similar goal. So I think in Jira you might consider having separate boards, so that would cut down on the amount of issues it has to hold, or proposals it has to hold. Yeah, it tends to be first a process problem and then second a tool problem. Yeah, right. But people that don't have good processes, it doesn't matter what tool you have. Right. So what's next? We doing a agile thing? Next, it's an agile project, product management, birds of a feather.
Okay.
Oh, this is juicy.
I'm going to stop recording.
Okay, thank you.
And